Have you ever felt that? That sudden, awful feeling when the world just tilts or starts to spin? That unsettling dizziness is something millions of us experience. But what if the real secret to fixing it isn't just about the mechanics of our inner ear? What if it's actually about retraining the pilot in our head, the brain itself?
So that leads to a pretty basic question, right? When you're treating dizziness, does the type of exercise you do really matter? I mean, of course it should. But what if the answer is, well, way more surprising than you'd think? A recent study put this very idea to the test, and wow, the results are really starting to shake things up and change how we think about all this. Okay, so here's the deal. This study, led by Sonia Vavan, looked at a group of patients who had acute vestibular injuries, basically recent damage to the balance system in their inner ear. They were split into 3 groups, and each group got a different but very common type of physical therapy. The goal was simple: see which one actually worked best. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. As you can see here, the group that got customized, personalized exercises saw the most improvement. Okay, no huge shock there. But look at this. The group with the worst outcomes? They were the ones who focused only on something called the vestibulo-ocular reflex, or VOR. Now, that's the reflex that keeps your vision stable when your head moves. For years, we thought fixing that specific reflex was the golden ticket. But this study showed it was the least effective approach. I mean, talk about a huge puzzle. Yeah, so this bizarre finding led experts like Dr. Bridget Wallace to ask the absolute perfect question. If trying to fix the quote-unquote broken reflex directly doesn't work so well, but other kinds of exercises do help, then what are we actually retraining? The answer, it turns out, has less to do with the hardware in the ear and everything to do with the software in the brain. Right, so if the brain is the key, we have to talk about how it learns. Because the brain's ability to adapt, it's usually this incredible superpower, right? But in this case, it can actually learn the wrong lesson entirely and create a really stubborn, bad habit. And it all comes down to this core concept called Hebbian learning. It's a pretty simple but incredibly powerful rule. Neurons that fire together, wire together. You know, think of it like walking the same path through a forest every day. Over time, that path gets clearer and easier to follow. It's how we form all our habits, both the good ones and the bad ones. So, after one of these vestibular injuries, the brain suddenly starts getting corrupted data. It's like your car's GPS is telling you to turn left, but the road signs are all saying turn right. The signals from your inner ear just don't match what your eyes are seeing or what your body feels from the ground. And that sensory mismatch is the trigger. It's what causes that awful feeling of dizziness and disorientation. And on this slide, we can see exactly how that learning process goes completely off the rails. It all starts with that sensory mismatch, which, makes you feel dizzy. So what's our natural human reaction? We avoid the things that make us dizzy. We're just trying to feel safe. But here's the catch. The brain gets immediate relief and learns, aha, avoidance is the answer. It works. And bam, those neurons fire together, they wire together, and that bad habit gets stronger and stronger. Over time, this whole cycle leads to a serious decline in what you're actually able to do in your daily life. Okay, so if the real problem is a bad habit the brain has learned, then the solution isn't about fixing the body's hardware, is it? No, it's about retraining the brain's software. And this leads us to a really powerful new way of thinking about therapy. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The old way, we tried to fix the car. We were so focused on the inner ear's hardware, like trying to fix a car's bad alignment and just hoping the driver figures it out. But the new and way more effective way is to train the driver. We focus on the brain's strategy, the software it's using to navigate the world, even with some faulty hardware. And guess what? We've got the numbers to prove it. Remember that study we talked about? Well, that customized train the driver approach led to improvement rates a full 25% higher than the generic fix the car routines. That's a huge difference. It tells us that personalization is absolutely everything. So, okay, we're all on board with training the driver. But how do you actually do that? I mean, how do you retrain a brain that has learned to play it super safe? Well, it turns out you have to present it with a very, very specific kind of challenge. And this idea isn't entirely new. Decades ago, a pioneering therapist named A. Jean Ayers saw this in her work. She noticed that when our sensory systems aren't working together properly, we develop these little coping mechanisms or maladaptive behaviors just to get by. And that's exactly what these bad habits are in action. So, the key to breaking that bad habit is finding what's called the just right challenge. Think of it like Goldilocks. If an exercise is too easy, the brain just coasts along. It doesn't need to change. If it's way too hard, the brain just panics and gives up. But if it's just right, well, then it's challenging enough that the brain's old avoidance strategy just doesn't work anymore. It's literally forced to come up with a new, more functional solution. And this whole process of finding a new solution, that's what we call true adaptation. It's basically an active command telling the brain, hey, you need to respond differently. So instead of relying on that faulty signal from the inner ear, the brain learns to trust other senses more, like your vision or your sense of touch. That's sensory substitution. And instead of avoiding movement, it learns new ways to move safely, and that's behavioral substitution.
This brings us to the final and maybe the most critical piece of this whole puzzle. Because if you want to give someone that just right challenge, you first have to understand the specific problem you're trying to solve for that individual person. It's really that simple. You can't train the driver if you don't know how they're driving in the first place. You've got to map out their unique, learned, and frankly, failing strategy before you can even hope to correct it.
So how do you do this mapping? It's all about objective measures. Good therapists learn to look for the physical signs of the problem, not just the symptoms a patient talks about. They use really specific tests, like dynamic visual acuity, to measure exactly how stable a person's vision is while their head is moving. They track every little change in balance. All of this data comes together to create this super precise map of the driver's strategy.
And that brings us right back to our metaphor and the ultimate question that sums all of this up. Let's say your patient's car consistently pulls to the right. The real question is, how are you going to measure that they are learning to steer left? See, the goal isn't just to tell them to drive better. It's to give their brain a new strategy, find that just right challenge to practice it, and then, most importantly, measure the improvement. And that is how you turn a powerful metaphor into a real metric, and how you truly, finally, train the driver.